Our paper movie slide is on the Battle of Midway by Mariana Orozco,
Mia Chavez,
and Alina Chavez.
The location of Midway took place in this little island on June 4, 1942, and lasted until June 7, 1942. 6 months later, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the American Pacific Fleet sank 4 Japanese fleet carriers. In that same year, the Japanese had been successfully creating Pacific Empire, as well as the Battle of Midway was the first military loss of the Japanese during World War II, and would begin to turn the balance of power in the Pacific toward the U.S.
This slide is on the troops movement. 4:30 Japanese launch strikes on Midway. 6:30 Japan attacks Midway Atoll. 7:02 Interface and Hornet launch strikes. 7:10 Midway torpedo planes VT attacks. 8 o'clock Midway base B-17s and dive bombers VB attack. 8:37 Japanese carriers begin recovering plans for Midway strike. 8:40 Yorktown launches strike. 9:28 Hornet VT attacks. 9:40 Interface VT attack. 9:47 McCluskey-size destroyer turns northeast. 10 o'clock Yorktown VT attacks. 10:22 Interface and Yorktown dive bombers VB. 11 o'clock Hiram launches attack VB and 8 VF-13. 12 o'clock Yorktown attacks by Japanese. 15:30 Interprism launch Interprism and Yorktown VB against Hiram. 17:05 Hiram hits by Enterprise and Yorktown VB.
The U.S. Navy defeated an attacking fleet of the Imperial Japanese Navy near Midway Atoll, making devastating damage on a Japanese fleet that proved irreparable. But John Keegan called it the most stunning and defensive blow in the history of naval warfare.
The U.S. had been flying fortress to drop bombs from the high altitudes, even several small bombs. They also have a large force of fighter planes designed to combat Japanese aircraft in the air. The U.S. plan was to engage the Japanese force with their forces based at Midway, then allow the U.S. carriers to come in and catch the Japanese. Wherefore, because the Japanese were on poor circumstances of the U.S. force, they were able to deliver a crushing blow. On June 3, 1942, the U.S. began its first attacks against the Japanese fleet sent to take Midway Island. But the first attacks on the U.S. were successfully, yet it did not punish the Japanese into action sooner than they had attempted. The next day, the Japanese sent their first force of bombers toward the bases on Midway. The U.S. had been ready for the attack and were able to get their aircraft into air before the Japanese attacked them. But while the Japanese were preparing for another attack on the Midway, their radios picked up the U.S. carriers approaching from the east. But the U.S. had approached the Japanese fleet by surprise, and the U.S. bombers were able to cause significant amounts of damage to them.